This is a Channel 7 News breaking news update.
Action 7 News team, and we're following big breaking news out of Orlando, Florida today. First there was Disney World, then came SeaWorld, and today we've learned that Adobe has announced they're planning on opening their own theme park. Guess what it's called? Photoshop World. The new park will be situated on nearly 400 acres, about 3.5 miles from the existing Walt Disney World Resort. But the biggest surprise is that the construction has been secretly underway for some time now. Our on-scene reporter, Terry White, was there for the announcement. Terry, did they say what the rides or attractions might be in this new theme park?
Well, Scott, it appears that there will be 6 themed lands, and one that I found particularly intriguing was Liquify Square, which is based on how Photoshop portrait retouching was done back in the 18th century colonial America. They did share a short preview clip of one of its marquee attractions, the Hall of Presets. Let's take a look.
You know, back then it was a different time. We did not have any of these fancy features like layers, masking, or even computers. We did everything with a knitting needle and a butter churn. I remember one day Jebediah came running into the field saying that he was all excited that Adobe had added a pen tool to Photoshop. And we all said, what's a pen tool?
Well, Terry, that's some really impressive technology. He looks so lifelike. But I have to say, this attraction has somewhat of a familiar feel to it. It almost feels like we may have seen this before. Is it just me?
It's not just you. I was thinking the same thing.
It's just such a familiar feel. Like, any thoughts, Terry?
It's really making me uncomfortable. I would like to move on now if possible.
Over at the Convention Center, Adobe has been doing the Photoshop World Announcement Press Conference, which is already underway, and Serge Remeli is on the scene. Serge, what are we hearing from the Adobe execs over there?
A lot of excitement and surprise here as Adobe unveils what they're already building here in Orlando. I wrote down some notes from what we were hearing earlier today in the press conference, where they were talking about one of the new attractions. They said one thing they wanted to do with this new park was to create something fresh, new, something that has never been seen before. So they asked their engineers to show park visitors different regions around the world, using little dolls and have them sing a song over and over again until you are nearly suicidal. It's called It's a Whole World After All. Here is a rendering of what the attraction will look like when it's done. We also have a sample of the soundtrack. Here, take a listen. Once you heard it 70 or 80 times, it's really catchy. Very, very catchy.
So Serge, are you picking up on a theme here? Because I feel like we've seen something very similar before, maybe 3.5 miles down the road.
I know, it's disconcerting.
So what does that mean?
I think it means there is less concerting.
Is concerting even a word?
I am really not sure.
Okay, well, let's head over to the construction site where our field reporter, Eric Kuna, is standing by. So, Eric, what can you tell us about the construction process that's happening right behind you?
Well, Scott, what I've been told by sources on the ground is that when this is completed, this is going to be the home of one of the biggest attractions here at Photoshop World. It's a theater in the round where audiences rotate around a stage showing different times in Photoshop history. And it's called Adobe's Carousel of Problems.
Eric, did they offer any sneak peeks of what they have in store for visitors to the new theme park?
Sure, actually they gave us a clip. Take a look.
It's autumn here and the leaves are already beginning to turn. Mother's in the kitchen using this newfangled tool called Photoshop. There's no subscription plan for Photoshop yet, so we had to sell old Bessie just to pay for it. But Mother says it makes her quilting much easier. Cousin Orville wants us to look at something they're calling Lightroom, and daughter wants $1,200 to buy Adobe Type Collection. That's more than I make in 3 years. With all these contraptions, it truly is the best time of our lives.
Wow. Well, I don't want to say this part out loud, but it sure feels like...
I know. It's not exactly fresh and original, is it?
Well, Scott, let me tell you something else about this location. Right behind the attraction, there's another one they're pretty excited about. It's called Lightroom's Clarity Jamboree, which features the country band of animated bears over-sharpening everything in sight. To the left of that, there'll be a buffet-style restaurant called the Crystal Panels. And on this side, there's almost done with another major attraction. It's a roller coaster based on Photoshop. And I know what you're thinking. You've kind of heard this before, but they're calling it Spacebar Mountain. Really, honestly, that's what they're calling it, Spacebar Mountain.
I mean, wow, this just all seems so familiar. The attractions, the songs, I don't know, am I the only one feeling this?
Scott, I don't think you are. And here's the thing, their tagline is, the happiest place in RGB. It's just so, I don't know. Anyways, I'm Eric Kuna reporting live from the future Photoshop world, where it feels much like another nearby world that I just can't put my finger on. Back to you in the studio, Scott.
Well, after today's press conference, we learned about a few of the other attractions coming to Photoshop World, and they're all built around a central location. It's called Clonarella's Castle. It's right at the center of the park. Now, these other attractions include, ready? Crash Mountain, the Jungle Curves, Pirates of the Creative Cloud, The Scary Adventures of Terry White and the Seven Warps, Lasso the Flying Elephant, Big Typo Mountain Railroad, The Haunted Midtones, and Rick Sammons' Delayed Flight. But the one that really caught us by surprise was the attraction called The Many Adventures of Winnie the Kuna. Photoshop World includes the theme park, hotels, and entertainment complex, along with Photoshop-themed retail stores and restaurants. The park is scheduled to open on September 9th, 2025 at around 10 a.m. And we take you live right now to the Photoshop World opening keynote.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage, Scott Kelby.
Hi, everybody. Hey, how you doing? Welcome to Photoshop World. It started in 1999, and here we are today, and we are so glad to have you with us. We have an amazing 3 days planned. We've got so many great classes, so many incredible instructors, and so many people, creative people from all over the world, all coming together for this event. And I just can't tell you how excited we are. It's going to be awesome. Now, you just saw the opening movie that we produced. It's kind of a tradition of ours. We do it every year. And no, they're no better than what you saw today. But besides that, you also probably noticed that we're not professional actors, and so that usually means that mistakes were made along the way. Let's take a look. Okay, how's my hair? Good? Beautiful?
It's pretty good.
I know.
Is Scott's name Scott? Because I think I should say well Scott.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
We already had Terry do that.
Like well.
Well, Scott.
Well, Scott.
Then came SeaWorld, and today they announced they were planning on opening a new theme park called Kuna World. Sorry, stupid.
I don't think you are, Scott. And here's a proof.
Announcing a new theme park called Kuna the Flying Elephant. No, that's bad.
I just said, you don't think when you start working at a place you'll be doing this, right? You just don't. But this is what we're doing, right?
I was very crying laughing.
Yeah, I was going to talk to HR tomorrow.
About what?
About doing this.
Really?
like,
Honestly? This is my job?
Yeah, is this in my job description?
Our on-scene reporter, Terry White, was there today for the announcement. Terry, did they say what rides or attractions in the new park might be based around you?
You know what, Scott? You're my friend, but this is making me uncomfortable.
This conversation is making me uncomfortable, and I have no idea why.
How comfortable does Scott make you?
Now we're going to jump to Serge Remeli, who's using a fake French accent as usual.
Cringy. You say cringy. Cringy is okay? If I say cringy? Yeah. Cringy.
Serge, are you picking up a theme here? Because I feel like we've seen something very similar before called the Eiffel Tower. No? No? Too soon?
And cringing is doing what? Sorry, I don't know what the word in English. So cringe to cringe.
Cringe.
To cringe, okay.
You know, like nowadays the girls would say it like, oh, it makes me cringe.
Okay.
You still recording?
Yeah, I'm recording.
All right.
I know. It's not exactly fresh and original, is it, Uncle Orville?
All right, Bill, this time I'm going to have you do a little more rocking.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to have you start looking off camera.
Okay.
You're going to be rocking. You're going to be admiring the leaves falling.
Okay. Action 7 News team here, and we have breaking news!
Cringy means like it's really bad. Now
Yeah,
it's
cringe.
yuck.
Makes you want to cringe.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, mistakes were made along the way. But I want to talk to you about something serious. I want to talk to you about something very interesting, and it's like a very hot topic right now, and it's artificial intelligence. But I kind of want to give you, like, from a photographer's point of view, at least how I am using AI inside of Photoshop and Lightroom, and I'm hoping to convince you to consider maybe doing the same thing. I want you to think of it as assistive AI. It's here to assist me. It's here to help me get more work done, and the more work I get done, the more time I have to do fun things. I like to think of it as like an unpaid intern, but a really, really highly motivated, good, and very fast one, and an accurate one. That's what I like to think of it. So I want to kind of take you through this and how I'm looking at this whole thing, all righty? So first, it's helpful if you understand that we've been using AI already for years. We've been using it without really it being called AI, but we've been using AI for many, many years. For example, in Photoshop, all of these features you see listed here, those are all AI-powered or AI-assisted features. And so are all of these, and all of these, and these too. Now, I know that some of you are only Lightroom users and you're, well, I don't use Photoshop. Then you have all these features in Lightroom that are also either AI-powered or AI-assisted. Oh yeah, and these too. So we've been using it for years without really thinking about it. But I think when we all opened our eyes to it was when Adobe announced the generative fill in Photoshop, right? And I don't know if you realize that was over 2 years ago when that came out, and it's grown so much since then. It is absolutely crazy, mind-blowing stuff. Like when you see what it does, you're just absolutely amazed. Now, when it did come out over 2 years ago, the community reaction was very different. It was very varied. So some people, like me, I saw it and I remember the first time I saw it, I was just absolutely amazed. So amazement was one of the big things, like, wow. And then some people, another group, were very concerned about it. Ooh, this is concerning. How is this going to affect me and photography as a whole? And then there are people that are just scared of it. It just seems scary. It seems like Terminator. Everything bad's going to happen. So I think over the years we've certainly changed, but I think the thing that changed it for me was learning how to work with AI and how to still sleep at night. So I feel good about using it and feel like I'm using it in a good way from a photography standpoint, right? And for a good way, I mean a way that lets me sleep at night. That's the thing for me. So a lot of it has to do with whether you sleep at night is how you look at it and then how you use it. How you look at it and how you use it are really going to color how you feel about it, all right? So let's talk about the generative fill. And if you've never used it before, it is mind-blowing stuff, and it's so easy. And I think that's part of its charm, is that it's just so easy. Basically, you tell it what you want to do. It zooms up to the cloud, right? Goes to the Adobe cloud. Up there, Taylor Swift comes on, does something real quick with it. The whole thing takes about 12 seconds, and then you have this amazing result. But it's not only a result, you can get 3 different results, and you can choose which one looks the best, or you can ask it to do it again. But how I want you to think about this, and I'm trying to frame this for you so you feel about it the way I feel about it, which is this is simply a production tool. I'm going to use this to do things I don't want to do, things that would waste my time normally, that would take me a long time to do. And that's when it's almost like passing it off to an assistant. Can you clean up this thing? Can you remove this distracting thing? Can you do this? Can you do that? And I'm going to go to lunch. And when I come back, it'll all be gone. Except for, in this case, you don't have to go to lunch. It's like 12 seconds. And the way I use it is this. Basically, I make a selection. Just whatever selection tool you're comfortable with. Lasso tool, polygonal lasso, or if you're a nerd, polygonal lasso. You can use the elliptical selection tool, whatever you want to use. And then you can just either click remove. If you click remove, whatever was there is gone. It's just gone. But you can also click on actually the generative fill button. You can click on the generative fill button, and then you decide, do I type something in here or do I leave it blank? The reason you would do this is because it will give you 3 different variations. When you click remove, it just removes the thing. And if it didn't remove it really the way you want it, you can hit remove again. In this case, you're going to get 3 different variations, and you decide which one looks the best, or you generate another set. So in this case, you would make a selection. Then you're going to click the button called Generative Fill, as seen here. And then you click Generate. And then you'll get your 3 variations, and you choose which one looks best to you. Now, so how do I use this? I leave that field blank. The reason is that field, if I type in anything, I'm going to get a different result. I use this to remove distractions. It's one of the things that you're either going to do in real life. Oh, look, there's a beer can in my shot. I walk over and get rid of the beer can. I don't know why there's always a beer can in my shots, but apparently it's very popular. Or I'm going to remove it later in Photoshop or in Lightroom, because both of them have a remove tool. So I'm going to remove them there, I'm going to remove them in some way. But here, if I just leave that field blank, if I just leave it blank and I hit generate, it's going to remove it. Now, why don't I type something in there? Because I want to sleep at night. If you type something in there, there's 2 reasons you'd want to do it. So when would you type in? They're called prompts, by the way. You're prompting it to do something. The prompt that I would type in would be, I want to add something. Please add a helicopter to this shot. Please add an eagle. Please add an airplane between these buildings. That's adding something that I did not photograph and I didn't take. Or you want to change something. You're wearing a red t-shirt, I want you to be wearing a ski jacket. So those make me lose sleep. So, and I know you're thinking, well, that's kind of old school thinking, but I want to feel good about what I'm doing. I want to feel like I'm doing something photographically somewhat ethical, and I don't want to really do something that's going to make me feel icky or weird or that I cheated, even though I'm using Photoshop, which some people that don't know Photoshop would tell you is cheating. By the way, if you ever hear someone say, I don't use Photoshop, I don't use Lightroom, I don't do those, all that means is, I'll just interpret it for you. I don't know Photoshop and I don't know Lightroom. I'm not very good at them, so I can't use them. All right, but let's just move on. All right, so I want to make it really clear. What do I use it for that lets me sleep at night? I use it to do things that I could already do in Photoshop. I could already copy things, cloning things. The clone tool has been in Photoshop since Photoshop 1.0. I've been able to move this over here, add a window here, do all these things for 30-something years. So that's not new. I could do these things, but instead of taking 2 hours, it can do it in 12 seconds. And what that does is that frees me up. That doesn't take away my creativity. It gives me time to be creative, because I'm not spending hours doing tedious production tasks that you want to give to an intern. Instead, it's over in 12 seconds, and now I can be creative and think of what I want to do, or I can spend more time behind the camera. Either way, it frees up my time from doing mundane, repetitive, boring things. All right? Now, however, I do reserve the right to make an exception. So what's the exception that I personally use? I'm just telling you how I use it. This is for you to consider. I think it is amazing for fixing compositional mistakes. I occasionally will make a compositional mistake, and by occasionally I mean quite often. So let me give you an example. The tool that I use, it's a part of the generative features. It's called Generative Expand, and it allows you to take the crop tool and literally just expand your composition. So let's take a look at this image right here, all right, taken up in Brooklyn, in Dumbo. What I'm going to do, let me move this out of the way. I'm going to get the crop tool, and I'm going to make sure that I choose Generative Expand from up there in the toolbar. And see how I cropped it just a little too close on the manhole cover? That kind of kills the shot. So all I do is I expand it out and hit the return button or the enter button, whichever, and give it a few seconds to do its thing. And by a few seconds, I mean 12. There we go. And look at the difference. And here's another version, the second one or the third one, and you can choose whichever one that you want. I'll give you another example. Here, let me switch images. This image, all right? So I hate that the bottom of the chair has been cut off, so much so that I hated using this photo for anything because I knew I had composed it incorrectly. So I'm going to go to Generative Expand. I'm going to just really, oh, right up here, there it is, Generative Expand, nice zoom. Let's just pull this down just a hair. And so just hit return, and it will give me, well, basically the new bottom of the chair. It's going to fill in the floor. It's going to do the right lighting, the right color, the right shadows. Look at that. See, this is the mind-blowing stuff I'm talking about. Now I got a second choice. I have a third choice. I'm thinking the second choice, right? That's kind of crazy stuff. So that is, I do reserve the right to make an exception. So I guess my message for you this morning, and I want you to consider it, right? Because I know that there are many of us that consider themselves artists, and you want to be able to, the ability to add an eagle that wasn't there or put a lighthouse on the rocks that wasn't there, and that's for you to decide. It's your tool, and you'll use it the way you want to. But what I want you to consider is to think of it and use it responsibly. Like, we'll use it responsibly like we've done everything else up to this point. We could have always done these things in Photoshop, but we kind of said, no, that's really, I want to remove stuff that's distracting and ruining the photo. You know, it's like, I think it was Henry Matisse that said, if something in your photo doesn't add to it, it takes it away. Now, he said it much more eloquently than that, but I'm paraphrasing there, but that's what he said. And so I think that's important, that we have to be able to simplify our images, clean them up, and get rid of stuff that maybe we could have walked over, or we didn't notice the beer can was in our shot until later. So now we can fix that, but we've been able to fix that for 30 years. I also want you to consider using a particular feature that's being developed right now by with Adobe and a group of other companies that are trying to let people know what was done to the photo and to be transparent about your use. So if you have generated something that wasn't really there, now you have a way to be able to actually admit it and just go, look, I used generative fill to add that lighthouse. It really wasn't here. And it's in beta right now, but you can go to Lightroom and you can ask for the content creation, have it available to you in Lightroom or in Photoshop. You can go into the window menu here and find content credentials. And basically what it's going to do, it's going to embed into the file kind of what you did. Now, not just the AI stuff, but it'll say these were the changes that were made to this photo. If you zoom in, you can see a little bit better here. So use it to do the things that you've already been able to do in Photoshop, and just do it faster and quicker to free up your time, to give you more time to be creative. And isn't that what we all want? More time behind the camera, more time to be creative, less time doing boring, mundane tasks. So that's why I'm thinking of it as assistive artificial intelligence. Actually, it should just be assistive intelligence, because it's helping me to do those things that I could already do in Photoshop. I want to avoid doing things that make me feel icky, that make me feel like I know I'm doing wrong. It makes me feel like less of a photographer and more of a cheater. I don't like that feeling. I want to feel good about the things that I create. One last thing, I want to leave you with a great quote from Richard Avaton, and I think it really sums it up beautifully well. Well, thank you guys for giving me this opportunity. Now, coming up next is our feature for the Keynote, and it is from Adobe. It's Adobe's Keynote, so I'm very, very honored to share the stage with Adobe. Anytime we get this chance, of course, you can imagine it's a real honor for us. And it's also an honor for me to bring up my dear friend and colleague, Principal Director and Community Advocate. Please welcome Mr. Terry White.
It is such a pleasure to be back here at Photoshop World, and I once again have the honor and privilege of doing the keynote for you. So let me walk you through some things that have been going on since the last time I was on the stage at Photoshop World last year. So first and foremost, if you want to keep in touch with me, there's a QR code. Go ahead and scan that on your own time. And let's go ahead now and talk about something that happened earlier this year. That's right, Photoshop turned 35. And the thing that blows me away is there are people using it that weren't born at that time. Like there are people that are under 35 that use it every single day. And if you go back to the earliest version of Photoshop, you'll appreciate some of the things that have happened along the way. So we celebrated Photoshop's 35th anniversary this year. And I have to give a special shout out to my colleague, Russell Brown, because Photoshop may not have existed, at least not the way you know it today, if it wasn't for Russell. Russell, back then, convinced John and Chuck, the founders of Adobe, that they need to buy it. Like he saw the presentation of it, and he convinced them to watch the presentation, and that's how Photoshop became Adobe Photoshop. So if you also go back and look at time in Photoshop, you might recognize some of these. These are some of the icons, and especially when you go back to some of the early ones, it's just amazing how far they've come. So you might remember it started out as the eye, then it turned into the feather, then it just became the PS, and here's some of the early screenshots of the startup screens. So just amazing how far Photoshop has come, and you look at some of this and you think back to when was the first version of Photoshop you used? For me, it was technically 2.0, even though I did start out a little bit for a little brief time with 1, but 2.0 and then quickly thereafter 2.5, and as they say, the rest was history. So Photoshop has come a long way in that 35-year time frame. These are the computers it first ran on. And if you are a Mac user, if you're old enough to remember these, that's a Mac Plus over there on the left-hand side, and probably a Mac LC on the right there. And even though Photoshop ran on a 9-inch screen, when I have a presentation of it when I was using it for the first time, and I did a demo, kind of reminiscent of the first Photoshop demo, and I showed it on Photoshop 1.0 in an emulator. And the thing was, I went to load a file and it couldn't open it. It was a JPEG because JPEG didn't exist back then. It had to be a TIFF. So just a little nostalgia there. That was a picture of me back in the time frame I first started using Photoshop. So in all that time, Photoshop has really come a long way to help you and keep reinventing and keep revolutionizing the way we work with our photos today. So when we think about Photoshop, we also have to remember that Photoshop is no longer just on your desktop. Photoshop is on multiple surfaces, including web and mobile, just like Lightroom. So Photoshop Web is actually Photoshop in your browser. You can go to photoshop.adobe.com in your browser and learn and use and work with Photoshop. And it's a great learning tool for those of you who are brand new to Photoshop, because honestly, the Photoshop in the web version is easier because it prompts you with a lot of things that Photoshop Desktop doesn't do. But it still has the power of Photoshop on the desktop in your browser. Another reason for this, because you might be thinking, well, if I've got Photoshop on my desktop, when would I ever need to download, or when would I ever need to go in the browser and use it, because I've already downloaded it. And if you think about situations like students, where they may not have the ability to download applications on a Chromebook or a device that just really has a browser. So all the software that they use is web-based. So Photoshop works for that quite well. And earlier this year, we introduced Photoshop first on iPhone back in February of this year. And then later in the summer, we came out with the Android beta. And that's, you might think, well, Terry, hasn't there already been a Photoshop on the phone and on the iPad? And yes, there have been various versions like Photoshop Fix and Mix and Photoshop Express. But the phone has now gotten to the point to where it's powerful enough to start bringing over real Photoshop workflows onto the phone. So this is a version you need to check out. It's free to download on your iPhone, free to download on your Android, and just go give it a spin. And you'll be amazed at how comfortable you are with it, because it's using the same terminology and same feature set as a lot of the things you do on your desktop. Now keep in mind, it will never be 100% of what's on the desktop, because number one, a lot of the stuff on the desktop is old and legacy, and you just wouldn't need to do it on your phone. And number two, most of the stuff on the desktop that is not going to be on the phone is the kind of stuff people don't care about doing on their phone anyway. So they're bringing over the best features and the features that people use the most often to the phone. All right, so let's talk about some Photoshop updates that have happened since last year. I always go back to my last keynote, which was in September last year, and I think, okay, let's look at all the cool things that have come out since then. And these are just some of the highlights. So we got better people masking, improved select subject and background, dynamic text. And you know what? I'm not going to read these because I'm just going to show them to you. I think that'd be easier than me reading a slide to you. And like I said, Photoshop on iPhone now available in the App Store, and you could download that as well. And the whole thing is that you can make edits anywhere. That's what this is all about. So whether you're at your desk, whether you're on the sofa, whether you're on a train or sitting in a park, you can go ahead and use the best of breed tools on your mobile devices. And that also includes Lightroom. So I would be remiss if I didn't talk about all the cool Lightroom features that have come along the way. And of course, Lightroom started out with the first real version on mobile when Lightroom iPad came out. So Lightroom iPad's out, Lightroom phone keeps getting better. And of course, Lightroom on desktop, and Lightroom also has a web version. So both sets of products are on all surfaces. And Lightroom just keeps getting better with all the things that we can do with it. And it's also reducing the reliance on having to go back and forth all the time between Lightroom and Photoshop. So here's some just highlights of the Lightroom updates that have happened since last year. And again, I'm not going to read you a slide. I will point out some things that I won't get a chance to show. So the tethering for Nikon users has been completely redone, much faster, much more reliable. And now for the first time this year in Lightroom Classic, we introduced tethering support for Fujifilm. So now we've got the major manufacturers of Nikon, Canon, Sony, and Fuji for tethering inside of Lightroom Classic. So Lightroom and Photoshop is where it's at for this crowd. So without further ado, let me show you some things. So I'm gonna pop over to, let's start with Photoshop on desktop. And although this is really not a super new feature, it's one of those things that got overlooked because it first appeared in Photoshop Beta, where we talked about it, and then it quietly made its way into the release version without much fanfare, and I think a lot of people don't even know it's there. So I have this group shot. I'm gonna go to my object selection tool, and when I'm in my object selection tool, it will calculate and look at objects in the scene. So that could be people, it could be trees, it could be whatever it thinks is an object. Once that's done, you'll notice there's a button to the left of that that's brand new. That's Select People. And when I click on that, it identifies that there are people in the scene. It shows 5 people, it shows 3 faces. If I click, I can see the other 2 faces. And as I hover over each person, it will highlight the person. Now, it is not perfect. For example, it did not get her black hat, but because her hat is considered an object, I can just hover over it and click on it if I wanted to get that object anyway. But what's cool about the people selection is not so much that you can select the individual people like this, is that you can go in, and when you click, you'll then see that it's identified all the aspects of that person. So it sees that he has a little bit of hair, it sees that he's got eyebrows, glasses, a nose, mouth, teeth, because his mouth is open, so forth and so on. So it's showing you all the things that you could select. So for example, I could select his upper clothes. I could select his lower clothes. And just with a couple of clicks, and if I need to select more than one person, I can also add in additional people. So I can add her in, for example, and that would get her upper clothes, and she's also wearing a coat, so I can do that as well. Or maybe I just want the coat and lower clothes. So I could do that and apply that selection. Once I apply it, it will give me the marching ants around those things, and then I could go in and continue workings. And I can also use the object selection tool to click and add to a selection if I want to as well. So it's just great to be able to have that people selection and then be able to do things with it. So for example, I can go into my hue and saturation adjustment layer, and with my hue and saturation adjustment layer, I can go ahead and make changes to the hue and saturation of those objects that are selected. So I can change their clothes quickly and easily without having to lasso around or, heaven forbid, use the pen tool to make those kind of selections. So people selection just got a lot better inside of Photoshop, and this is kind of similar to the masking that you already have in Lightroom. Now, this is one of my favorite things to talk about because people go into Photoshop every single day to remove backgrounds or to separate objects from the background. And if you know remove background, you know that it's based on how contrasty the object is that you're removing from the background itself. So in this case, not a lot of contrast. That bike is almost the same color as the wall against it. So that's going to make it really hard. So if I were to go ahead and click remove background, I may or may not get a good result. Let's see what we get. I got a great result. You know why I got a great result? Because there's something new. If I go into my settings here and I go to image processing, you have an option to now choose between cloud processing and device processing. So mine was on cloud processing. I'm gonna switch it to device. I'm gonna switch it back to the old way and undo it. And now let's go ahead and say remove background. That's what we would have gotten prior to this update. And you would just undo it and try and figure out a different way because that's just not gonna ever work. So thanks to the cloud processing, which doesn't cost you anything, doesn't cost anything extra, the idea here is that no matter how fast or your laptop or desktop is, the cloud processing is a room full of computers that are always going to be able to process and give you more detail. So now when I click remove background with cloud processing on, I get, takes a few more seconds, but I get a beautiful result that's worth it. So that's cloud processing for remove background and select subject. Now let's talk about for people that use Photoshop for design. Designing with text has always been a cool thing to do. And you'll notice that there's a new button with your text options, and this is called dynamic text. Because in the past, if you wanted to make this all the same width, you would then have to select the girls just, and you'd have maybe use your keyboard shortcut, and you would keep scaling it and scaling it and scaling it to say, oh, no, it's a little too big. Oh, no, it's a little too small. Then you have to go in and manually do it. So what I'm going to do instead, let's go back and revert this back, is I'm going to go in and just turn on one option. It's a brand new option called dynamic text. So I click dynamic text and it just does it. But it doesn't just do it statically. If I were to now go in with my type tool and I were to resize this, it keeps it dynamic. No matter how big I make it, no matter how skinny I make it, and even if I add more text, girls just want to have fun all the time. If I can get my space there. There we go. So dynamic text is going to be huge for people that do type design inside of Photoshop. Just quickly and easily, and you can make all your same changes and it will keep it dynamic unless you turn dynamic text off. There we go. So next up, let's pop over to, again, another one of my favorites, and it is using, you saw Scott use generative fill to remove things, and Scott didn't let you in on kind of one of the downsides to doing it. Because generative AI is not a person, it can get things wrong. And sometimes we refer to those as hallucinations. So I want to remove the guy's hands and that jar on the left-hand side. And I've done in this image a million times. And most of the time it gets it right. But sometimes it does this, and anyone who's used generative fill will relate. It replaces the hands with something new. So that plate and that looks like, I don't know, cheesecake or whatever that is on it, is new. That's a new object. So I didn't want that. So now, thankfully, the new remove tool has been revamped to do what you would want it to do, which is remove. So if I click, if I find my remove tool, there it is. I click my remove tool, and let's make my brush bigger. I'm going to go ahead, and by the way, you have an option to use generative AI or not. I'm going to use it, and you can also set it to auto where it decides where it thinks it needs to use it. But if I turn on the generative remove so that it's always using it, then I'm likely going to get a better result. So I'm just going to go ahead and overspray, overpaint this whole area. There we go, and then fill in the middle. And by the way, for those of you who were getting hallucinations, 9 times out of 10, you would get a hallucination because you didn't paint something. Like there was a pixel left, and AI says, oh, you left a pinky. I gotta fill in the rest of the hand for that pinky. And that's why you would get new people. So just make sure you fill it all in, and that will most likely give you the results that you're looking for. So I'm just making sure I get the bottom down here, make sure I get it all. And then once I get it all, I'm gonna go ahead and say, process it. And I get my table. I don't get a new object. And by the way, if you use the method that Scott showed earlier, where maybe instead of using a remove tool, you just make a selection. Make a better selection. There we go. And you know when you're selecting things that are next to each other, that also causes hallucinations. But now using this button, this brand new button on the contextual taskbar, remove means remove. So it will remove that object and not replace it with something new, just like that. And you might notice it's even a little faster. All right, last but not least, in Photoshop, I'm going to talk about something also that got added, kind of hidden in plain sight. And that is this new Adjust Colors button. For years, we've made selections and then tried to make adjustments to the color, and you still can. But now, we made that a little easier, especially for new users, because when you click Adjust Colors, the first thing it does is it identifies the primary colors in the image. And then you just say, oh, there's the pinkish purple I want to change. I click on it, and then I start making changes to it, and it changes those colors. I didn't have to make a selection first. I didn't have to figure out how to do it. I just told it what I want the color to be changed to, and it just figures that out. So quickly and easily making changes, same thing on our pants. If I were to change that color, I can change that color quickly and easily just with a couple sliders and a couple taps. So that is Adjust Colors. And that is what's new for the most part in Photoshop. But wait, there's a public beta that started 2 years ago. And that public beta has been going strong ever since. And the public beta is something you can install right alongside your regular Photoshop, just like I have it here. And you can use it and test out the new features or not. It's optional. You can install it if you want to or not. I'm gonna go to a folder, and in that folder, I've got a chair. I'm gonna drop that chair into Photoshop. And now I get that chair in here, and I'll go ahead and scale it and place it where I want it. Let's put it on the floor, scale it down maybe a little bit. And the thing about compositing is it's a dead giveaway when the object has no shadows, when the object has different lighting, and when the object has a color that doesn't kind of match the rest of the scene, let alone perspective and angles. But just getting those things right is always where the work comes in to Photoshop. So now, thanks to a new button in the public beta, Harmonize. Harmonize will take the layer I just dropped in, look at the scene around it, and create a third or new layer that is a composite of those things, adjusting the item I just dropped in. So basically harmonizing the scene. So we'll give it a few seconds to do that. And just like that, in a matter of a few seconds, I got my new composited scene. And I even get variations to choose from. So if I switch over to the properties panel, there's 1, 2, and 3. I kind of like 3. I kind of like 1. I'm not a fan of 2. So I'd probably go with number 1 as my variation that I like. And again, I know it's easy for your eyes to adjust to what looks better. So if I go back and show you the previous one, here's before. Look at how the light's blown out on it. The chair's too bright, not the right color. And if you look at the vase next to it, it's even adjusted the vase lighting too, because the chair would be blocking some of that light coming in from the window. So it's amazing that Harmonize is here to make your compositing life that much easier and better. And it gives you a new layer with a mask. So if you don't like it, you can go in and adjust the mask as well. All right, last but not least in Photoshop, because there's sake of time, I'm going to look at a picture of me when I was a kid. Now this picture, unfortunately, was scanned in from an old photo, and apparently back then I only scanned it in at a mere 674 pixels by 956, so it's really small. Now I can go into my image menu to Generative Upscale. And with Generative Upscale, I can go up to 4 times the size of the original and let Generative AI not only upscale it, but also do a little bit of cleanup, which is optional for you to use if you want when the results is done. Now, when the results come in, it will give you a brand new image, a brand new window. So you can, you still have your original. Here's a brand new window, it's much bigger. And now if I go look at the resolution is now 2696 by 3824. So literally 4 times the size. And if we look at the details, this was the generative part that I was talking about, it gave me this extra layer. This is without using the generative cleanup, and this is using the generative cleanup, and that's a layer, so you can just lower the opacity if you don't want all of it. And you just drop it down a little bit and get some of that cleanup if you think it's too strong. But that is Generative Upscale. Check it out in the new public beta. Now, without further ado, let's switch over to Lightroom Classic. In Lightroom Classic, I'm just going to show you a couple things here that are new. First and foremost, let's talk about reflections. I got an image here from Adobe stock, and this image has a window reflection. If you ever tried to photograph a window like this, you get reflections. And now reflection removal is part of the editing stack inside of the Remove tool. So if I go to the Remove tool, and I go to Reflections, and I can then apply that reflection removal. Give it a few seconds to cook. And like that, the reflection's gone. Now you might be saying, well, Terry, your slider started out at 0, and normally your result would come in at 100, but I had already processed this before. So if I go back down to 0, well, that makes sense. That goes down to where the image used to be. But why can you go to the left? Like, what would be on the other side of 0? Well, it would be what's on the other side of the window. The actual part that was reflected on the outside of the window is now showing as well. So you get complete control over removing reflections inside of Lightroom and Lightroom Classic. All right, next up, let's talk about one of my, again, favorites, and that is removing people distractions. And if you've ever shot travel or landscapes, you know you got to get there early for the good light, but you also got to get there early if you don't want people in your shot. And I'm not a fan of waking up early, so I get people in my shots all the time. Let's go in and let's go to remove. Let's go to the brand new distraction removal. We'll go to people and we'll turn it on, and it identified all the people. Now I'll click remove. You saw it just like that. So before, after, before, after. Now it changed that background a little bit where the people were, because it had to guess what was back there, because it can't really see any of it, but that's okay. I'm okay with the main subject being there intact with the people removed. All right, last but not least, just a shout out for people that do noise reduction. So noise reduction has been one of those things that people use inside of Lightroom every single day. And it is AI based, so it's one of those things Scott talked about, that we just use it to assist us all the time. And now noise reduction has become, instead of this separate operation that always generated a new DNG, a new file, and every time you need to run it, you had to run it again from scratch. Now you just run it once. So I'll let it denoise this. And still might not be able to see how good of a job that did, so let me zoom in some more. Here's before, here's after, and I still have a slider to even make it more. So that's the noise we had. That's me getting rid of all of the noise. So the beauty of this is, to make that adjustment before, I'd have to rerun it. Now I can just move that slider back and forth to my heart's content and have a great denoise experience. And I can make that a preset now and apply it to multiple photos at the same time. All right, so that was Photoshop and Lightroom. And I could be done, but in keeping up with tradition, Scott talked about AI, and I kind of want to riff off something he did. So our AI engine that powered all of the generative stuff you saw today is called Adobe Firefly. But earlier this year, we opened up Adobe Firefly to work with third-party models. So these models are all in there now, available for you to use. So instead of you having to go out to each one of these sites, create an account, pay for it, set up your system there, and then apply it or try it, oh, I don't like those results. Let's switch to the next company, next site, pay for that, figure out how to use that, so forth and so on. We bring all these models right into Firefly for you to try out and use. And they're part of your Creative Cloud Pro plan, or if you need them, you can buy a separate Firefly plan just to do this. So I'm gonna pop over to, actually I'm not gonna pop over to Photoshop, I'm gonna pop over to my browser. So in my browser, I've got the Firefly website at firefly.adobe.com, and like Scott, I don't really generate images from scratch. The icky thing he was talking about. I'm a photographer, so I shoot things. But a lot of times customers will bring me photos that they've shot or photos that they've scanned, like this photo that needs some restoration, and I would turn this job down. I don't have that kind of time, and I'm just not that good. I'm not that good to bring this back. But now I could say, okay, let's go into this. Let's add this as a reference image, and let's restore this photo, removing dust and scratches, and also colorize it. Be sure to restore his hands, because his hands are completely gone. Now I'm in firefly.adobe.com, but I'm also in a new feature on Firefly called Boards, which allows you to basically create a mood board of multiple images and apply different things so I can have these side by side. Instead of the Firefly website, maybe only doing them one at a time. So we'll wait for that result. And there it is. So now I'll click, and I can just place that right on the canvas right next to it. And like I said, there's no way I would have even been able to do that if I wanted to. I don't know how long this would have taken me or that I ever would have got that result. And anyone who's not only restored a photo but tried to colorize it knows how time intensive that can be. So this is another example of AI assisting me. And with that, thank you, Photoshop World, and back to you, Scott.
Thank you, Terry. That was fantastic, as always. Thanks very much.
Have a good one.
All right, folks. Now, we are about to wrap things up, but don't go quite yet, because there's some important things that you're going to want to know, some scheduling things that you're going to want to know right up front, right now. So to help us do that, please join me in welcoming Mr. Larry Becker. Larry, welcome.
Scott. Thank you. One of the traditions at Photoshop World is the Hall of Fame. And the Photoshop Hall of Fame was actually designed to honor and recognize those individuals whose contributions to the business, education, development, and the art of Adobe Photoshop have enduring value. The Photoshop Hall of Fame was founded in October of 2000. And now the 2025 inductee of the Photoshop Hall of Fame is Mike Shaw, Senior Quality Engineer, Adobe Photoshop. Mike was with Adobe for nearly 30 years, where he helped create and test many of the most used and beloved features in Photoshop. Mike is probably most noted for working with Jerry Harris to implement the current painting engine and stylus support system in Photoshop. Most recently, Mike was using his talents to help bring Photoshop to the mobile surfaces, including the iPad as well as the iPhone. Mike's high standard for quality was apparent in everything he touched. Sadly, Mike passed away on March 19, 2025. Those who knew and worked with Mike appreciated his quiet demeanor, dry and dark wit, and his love of art and nature. Mike will be dearly missed by his colleagues at Adobe and around the industry. To learn more about Mike and the other award recipients, we invite you to visit PhotoshopHallOfFame.com.